Jumpin' In on Manx Radio.
With Howard and Chris Kane.
Hello.
Good evening.
And welcome. It's that time again. A Saturday night on Manx Radio. It's time to get out your beer, whiskey, hot chocolate, whatever the case may be. Sit back and enjoy some of the best sounds in modern and contemporary jazz from around the globe. It's Jumping In with myself, H.
And me, Chris. Yes, welcome along to this week's show. And can you believe it? We're nearly a quarter of the way through the year already. And next weekend, we're into summertime. At least with our summers, you know, it's only the clocks that are going to change. And if you believe the tabloids, we couldn't be under a foot of snow later this week. So, H, who's been as cool as a snowman to your choice this week? And who's just been a load of old snowballs?
Word of advice, never read the Daily Express comments on
Amazing.
Yes, how they get away with it, I don't know. Right, I've been really enjoying the new Charles Lloyd just out on Blue Note. The Sky will still be there tomorrow with Jason Moran and Larry Grenadier, Brian Blade at the drums. A bit of a reissue coming out around about World Record Day as well, I think, which is one from Alice Coltrane, a live concert back in the 1970s. And our old friend Kjetil Mjølelid bringing out some classic stuff with a Norwegian tinge as well.
And from me, well, we're hearty, we're bony. Hearty again, but in the breakfast sense. And to start the ball rolling, let's let it go with the Brecker Brothers. Let It Go, taken rather obviously from a live album, Some Skunk Funk, with Randy and Michael Brecker and the fabulous WDR Big Band. That track featured solos from Randy on trumpet, Jim Beard on keyboards, and Ludwig Noos from the WDR Band on trombone. Jim Beard sadly passed away a week or so ago from complications following a sudden unexpected illness at just 63. Composer, arranger, producer and keyboardist, he played with many great names, including Pat Metheny, Wayne Shorter, John McLaughlin, Schofield, Mike Stern, many others, including also producing and playing sessions and touring with Steely Dan. Joe Zawinul once said of him, "Jim Beard is the finest keyboard player I know, besides me." Very typical Joe Zawinul sort of comment, but he had lots of great solo releases too, and very sad about his passing. Maybe we'll pop a few of those on in the near future.
That'd be a lovely idea, yeah. Good idea. Good thinking, that man. It is Jumping In, Chris and H with you, of course. Kjetil Mjølelid, a wonderful player, sails perhaps a little bit under the radar compared to some of his Norwegian compatriots, but certainly not through lack of talent or imagination or skill and all the rest of it. And he is actually relatively prolific. We spoke to him, a few years back now, at the Southport Jazz Festival when he was playing there with his trio, and a very jovial character he was too. And we've sort of vaguely stayed in touch with him since, and actually hopefully maybe speaking to him in the foreseeable future would be nice. He's out and about, I think, touring as we speak, and a new father as well. He's got a new album out, which actually came out yesterday officially, 22nd of March, Agoja. Which he says was the first, I don't know whether it's a Norwegian word or not, it doesn't mean anything to me, but he says it was the first word or discernible sound or word that his young child made. So he thought it would be a wonderful name for the album. They've also had a single out, Thousands of Lost Stories, which is being doing the rounds, promoting it, and a lovely sound it is too. I thought we'd hear something from it, from the album. This one is called Alone. liking that a lot, I must admit. Kjetil Mjølelid from his new album just released yesterday, Agoja, which he says was there. I became a father for the first time. Agoja, if that's how it's pronounced, Agoja, was the first approximate word I heard my son say, and therefore I've chosen to name the album exactly that. And that track was called Alone. He's got that wonderful Nordic tradition, a bit of electronics there as well. Like I said, we saw him with his trio quite a few years ago. He still performs with his trio. He does solo work. He has another group, Waco, or Wacko, I don't know which way you pronounce it, Wako. Their first album was particularly fine. I enjoyed that one, and a really good sort of Nordic sound to it. Thousands of Lost Stories brought out as a single, and I think he's a bit of a free improviser. He sort of says of the album and the single, I booked the studio without knowing the direction at that time, but the following days shaped a musical world that became clearer with each recorded phrase. And a great cast on. There's a whole host of great musicians on the album. Ave Henriksen, we heard a bit of there, I think. Selma French, Martin Mille Olsen, Matthias Eick playing there, Trivsim, I never get his pronunciation right, on a sax, Lars Hundevedt, Andreas Winter, Sasha Berliner, Lida Reed, Sinja Amuleth, and Bara Reinert Poulsen, featuring on that album. Just out, well worth checking out. And like I said, we're hoping to have a little chat with him. He's actually midway through a tour at the moment, but he's got a couple of free days and is happy to have a little chat. So we're hoping to catch up with him next week.
Ave Henriksen, of course, playing trumpet in a very flutish style, which he learned from the shakuhachi players in Japan. He spent some time there. And he always uses electronics, but I think it's the first time I've seen Kjetil actually playing keyboards as well as piano on that release. So very interesting indeed.
Nice.
Next from me, a new release, the first of a couple, both from Canadian musicians, by coincidence. This first one is from a pianist and composer, Andy Milne, sent to us from our friends at Sunnyside Records. Although they're noted for largely swinging releases, this could easily be an ECM or an ACT release, I think, and sounds decidedly European to me. Andy Milne is a storyteller, and his last album, Remission, was inspired by his diagnosis, treatment and consequent recovery from cancer. This new release, Time Will Tell, he says, is about his lifelong search to discover his birth mother, and he's an orphan, but he said the inspiration for nearly all the tracks came after finally tracking her down and meeting her and expanding and changing his life with a new family circle. Here's the opening track, Purity of Heart. Very nice indeed. I've been enjoying that album quite a lot. It's called Time Will Tell. That track was Purity of Heart, new release on Sunnyside Records from award-winning pianist and composer Andy Milne. A really lovely release, I think. A great trio augmented by a couple of guests on several tracks, including that track with saxophonist Ingrid Laubruck.
All right, Ingrid,
yeah, she's on that track and another 3 on the album.
Stateside now, isn't she?
She is. So there's 9 tracks on the album. She's on 4 of them. They met while working together at the Jazz Composers Orchestra at UCLA, which Milne described as a transformative experience. And she subsequently invited Andy to join her on a duet project during lockdown, which he said was both entertaining, challenging, and a great process working with her. And on 4 of the other tracks, second guest is Yoko Ryakano Kimura on koto, and the rhythm section of John Herbert on bass and Clarence Penn at the drums. Time Will Tell is released at the end of next month.
Terrific stuff, and one of those topics which always fascinates me, how artists like Ingrid, sort of how they decide where to move to for whatever artistic scene they're into, as it were. Because you think in her case, she was German and started out on the German jazz scene and moved around a bit, then hit the London scene for several years and was playing with the Fire Collective and such like, and then disappeared and, went across the Atlantic and has now been settled, I think, and married and such like for many years now in New York, I think it is, in stateside.
Yeah, I think a lot of them do go for further education and higher education, and they look at good degrees with good teachers, particularly as jazz courses tend to be taught by soloists in your, in your instrument, and I think that's a great attraction to move countries, but the scene, obviously, the jazz.
I think it's the scene. I was thinking Tom Arthurs, we've interviewed several times on Jumpin In, who now is in Berlin. That Tom, and we've seen him. He's on the British jazz scene for a long time, trumpet player, and then moved across, and he's went to the German jazz scene, which Ingrid had left, settled in Berlin. Yeah.
Well, Berlin still has a thriving scene, it appears, doesn't it? So anyway.
Marvellous
very,
stuff.
very nice indeed.
Terrific. One man who probably doesn't need any more instruction, I dare say, whether it's music or spiritual, is Charles Lloyd, in his 80s now, going up to 90, I think, and still bringing out albums at a rate of knots. 3 last year, a trio of trios, and this year a double album just out on Blue Note. The Sky Will Still Be There Tomorrow, featuring old buddy Jason Moran, Larry Grenadier, he's played with for a long time, often over 20 or 30 years, and I think for the first time on the drums, Brian Blade. Cracking album, really enjoying that one so far. Let's hear the title track, The Sky Will Still Be There Tomorrow. Loving that. Very good indeed. The latest from Charles Lloyd. The sky will still be there tomorrow. As I said, featuring his old compatriot Jason Moran, who he's been playing with for a long time. And he says in the liner notes that he feels he's on the sort of same wavelength as Jason in many ways. And then, of course, Larry Grenadier, as he says, has drifted in and out of my music for a good 2 decades or more. Brian Blade, the new man in the pack. And he basically says he's almost thought, from what he says in the notes, of packing it all in, really. He's so frustrated with the way the world is. And he's a very spiritual man. And again, a man who's already spent years of his life in meditation and retreats and such like, and has a lot of sort of philosophies linked in with Buddhism and ancient sort of Indian beliefs and such like. So he's coming very much from that space, as his music always has done. And he clearly is very frustrated with the state of the world now, and he almost wanted to just jack it in and go back off again. He owes no one anything, does he? And just go back into retreat, I think, and put the saxophone down forever. However, he felt he couldn't really do that, and he says he's talking being a child of the South and how he'd moved over to the West, as far west as the train could go. And he goes on that his heart was broken in knots, emotions gone haywire post-COVID, and I became increasingly agitated. My heart in knots, my mind at war with the situation. I came to the lunch table one day and told Dorothy, his wife, Dorothy Dar, his wife of a long time, I wanted to go into the studio with Jason, Larry and Brian to make an offering of tenderness. She sent out the smoke signals, which created an endless back and forth from 2020, sliding into 2021, 22, 23, before finally getting all the calendars to overlap and lock. So he says, all my relations, my inclination to put down the saxophone and go back to the woods has been staved off for another season. This is my offering to you, yours in music, Charles Lloyd. Well, it's a very good offering, Charles. I must admit, we're very grateful for that. And of course, we caught him at the London Jazz Festival last year.
We did. And he is, in interview, you hear him, he's a very, very spiritual man, as you said, and feeling means everything to him, and particularly the negativity was causing him real problems in the world overall. Now, my second exhibition north of the border to Canada is from drummer and composer Ernesto Cevini, with his regular medium-sized ensemble Turboprop. Now, they've played together since 2015, and like my previous guest, have also received a Juno Award, which is the Canadian equivalent of the Emmy. Their new release is called A Canadian Songbook. Ernesto says he loves being Canadian and has always thought of the country as produced some great musicians, from his pop influences as a young man, ranging from the Bare Naked Ladies, Alanis Morissette, to his jazz influences, Oscar Peterson, Barry Elms, Mike Murley, and many, many others. Here's Skeletons. Skeletons, the opening track from A Canadian Songbook, the new release from drummer Ernesto Civini and Turboprop. Really tight unit. You can tell they've all played together and been friends for some time. They've got 6 releases out as Turboprop. That's the first one I played. I have played some Ernesto before in a number of formats, with his trio Myriad 3 and with his quartet Tetrahedron, and many of them share members of the lineup. So who's in the band? Well, Tara Davidson on alto, Joel Fromm, he's got many releases in his own name, on tenor, William Kahn on trombone, Adrian Ferrugia on piano, great piano playing on this album too, Dan Loomis on bass, and Ernesto at the drums. And out of those 6 albums, I've been looking back through them, having come across this new one, and I have to say, I'll definitely be playing some more Turboprop in the future. Really, really tight band and great sound.
Certainly is a great sound. Well, we like to think all the music on this programme is a great sound, of course. Like this track coming up, Alice Coltrane. She still has a legion of followers and a sort of meditative spiritual jazz again, really a bit like Charles Lloyd in many ways. Married, of course, her husband, John Coltrane, so you can see where she's coming from, and played long after his death, playing this, again, spiritual, meditative, call it what you will, music. A new one just coming out, a release of a concert recorded in the 1970s in Carnegie Hall, I believe it was. And yes, a live, I don't think it's been released before, that wonderful live sound. It does mean all the tracks are incredibly long. I think the shortest is about a quarter of an hour, and some of them are knocking on half an hour. So we won't get all one in, but let's hear a little bit of Shiva Loka. just a taste at least of Shiva Loka. Alice Coltrane live at Carnegie Hall in 1971, 4 years after the death of her husband, John Coltrane. Just released for the first time in its entirety on Impulse on Friday, yesterday, 22nd of March. And it arrived, like I said, at a pivotal point. She'd just released also Journey in Satchidananda, and a spiritual quest was continuing. An amazing lineup. Kuma Kramer and Tootsie Reynolds playing harmonium, tambura, and then you've got the likes of Pharaoh Sanders, I think we're hearing now, Archie Shepp, 2 bassists, Cecil McBee, Jimmy Garrison, 2 drummers, Ed Blackwell and Clifford Jarvis, and the whole thing benefiting the Integral Yoga Institute. Wonderful.
Yeah, indeed. Well, bending over backwards to please us, it turns out, and that's about it for this week's show. Next week, we'll be having a bit of an Easter special, so don't forget to bring an egg. But for now, we'll leave you with a new release from LA-based composer, saxophonist, keyboardist and producer Ted Tafaro and friends. He says, "I've always been interested in the cycle of fourths, and I like to use it as the basis for all my composition." Taken from his new release, Bacon, Lettuce and Tomorrow, here's In the Heart. See you next week.
See you next week. Tom Herbert. No, Tom Arthurs. That was
Tom
the man
Arthurs,
Tom
right.
Arthurs. Honestly, age is a terrible thing.
One more time.
Okay.
This
That's
is what
how
we think.
This is how we make sense of the world, but that's not the sense the world is making.
Ooh.